My name is Harold Epstein, Harold Bay Epstein, and I was born in 1923, June the 8th, in Omaha, Nebraska. And I was born at 2109 Grant Street in Omaha. My earliest remembrance of when I was a young boy was actually when I helped my brother on his paper route. I was probably at that time 7 or 8 years of age, and I know that he had a paper route on West Farnham Street, and I know it was a very hot one particular day, and I think I wanted a frozen Snicker. I think they were 5 cents a piece, and my brother Jack said no, he couldn't buy that for me because he had to take whatever money he made back to Mom because she needed it. I didn't understand it at the time, but I certainly do now. What else has been in my life? When I used to help my father on the truck, and my father was a fruit peddler. That I remember, and I know I didn't like it very much, I can tell you that. But my mother's name is Sophia, my father's name is Abe, and I went to Lake School as a young boy and graduated Lake and went on to Tech for 1 year. At Tech High School, the reason I went to Tech was because it was a technical school, and I was told by my brother when I was 14 years old that I needed a technical trade. I can tell you also a story about that too. My first year was at Tech, and I took a subject called woodworking and almost cut off my wrist my first day, and I knew that wasn't for me. So the second year, I transferred to Central High School and graduated there in 1941. I met my wife when I was about 15 years old at a boy-girl party, but I wasn't allowed to date until I was 16. What else can I tell you about that? I think my first date with my wife was when she asked me to go to a weenie roast with her, and I think I was 16 at that time. I believe I was. And that was it. And I fell in love with my wife, and I also was pretty athletic in PTA at that in those days. Athletic enough to become the president of our chapter, which was the 100 Cornhusker chapter. And
Hey, tell me a little bit about your parents.
okay, my parents were. Both my mom and dad were born in Russia. My father served in the Russian army, and he was 3 years in Siberia. I don't know a heck of a lot about his background, and I know that he came to this country in 1913, and my mother came in 1914. As it may seem, my mother came on the same ship my father-in-law came on. She came second class, and my father-in-law was third class. But they met on the ship, and they came to Omaha, Nebraska. My mother was landed in Halifax, Canada, as well as my father-in-law. And he asked her at that time what city she was going to, and she said Omaha, and he said Omaha. And they took different trains, and my mother went to a Jewish show 7 years later at the Brandeis Theater, the old Brandeis, and this was on 17th and Douglas Street. And she said to my father, I think I know that man up in the balcony. And it happened to be my future father-in-law. And my father said, yeah, you know everybody. You know. Anyhow, to make a long story short, when I brought my wife home to meet my mom and dad, at that time she was my girlfriend, my mother said to my wife that she knew her dad long before she was even born. So that was a funny gesture, and it's a true gesture, really. My brother gave me a nickname of Bay when I was about 5 or 6 years old. I think at that time, my mother said to my brother that I must go with him wherever he goes. And evidently I must have tagged along with him, but he tied me to a tree. But I don't know how old I was at that time. I think he said I was, and I also was the baby of the family. He said to me, I'm going to call you baby. And he said, and it's going to stay with you the rest of my life. And that it has. Because when I got to high school, even my teachers were calling me Babe. So it went from baby to babe, down to babe. So, and I think even to this day, and I'm close to 80 right now. In fact, I'm just a year away from it. And so that's how Bay has stuck with me all this time.
Why did your parents come to Omaha Bay? Was there any reason?
My father had an uncle in this city, and I think I asked him the same question: why did he come to Omaha? And he told me that that's why he came. And he said he didn't know Omaha. I said, why didn't you stop in New York City or Texas or someplace like that? He said, no, I came to Omaha because of my uncle. And that's what happened. He came at 13, and I know that as I said before, I know that he served 3 years in the Russian army, and I guess he married my mother when he came home. I have no idea, unfortunately, and my sister and brother don't know either. We didn't ask any questions in those days, and I'm sorry that I never did that, because I'd like to know a lot more background about my folks. Except that I came from the family was poor, as most families were in those days, and but my mother was always made me feel that the food on the table and stuff like that. I can tell you there were some winters that I wore tennis shoes to go to school in big snow, and that wasn't fun, but I didn't think anything of it at the time. So that's the way we grew up. You know.
When you lived where you mentioned earlier, is that when you started Central and Tech and then Central?
When I was at 2109 Grand Street, yes, I started Tech then, and I also transferred and went to Central from that residence. Then I went into service in 1943, and I was 3 years in the service, and when I came out, my wife and we got married. Well, actually, we got married almost a year before because I was going over. I came back from Europe, and I was going to Japan, supposedly, and the war in Japan had not ended at that time, and we got married in 1945. I have from those results, and I got discharged in 1946. But my firstborn was a boy, which was the firstborn grandson in our entire family. Because my brother had 2 girls, and my sister had 2 girls too, prior to that. And we had the first grandson. And from that time on, we had 2 more after that. Paul was born in 1948, Steve was born in 1951, and Gary was born in 1956.
Bay, did your mother have any family when she came over here?
She had 2 sisters. She brought one from Cuba. She sent for one of them, and one of them one was here already, and her name was Foreman. But she died at an early age in her early 50s, and my other aunt died in I'm thinking maybe 20 years ago. I'm not sure when she died, but I know she died after my mother. My mother died at an early age. My father lived 101 years old, thank God. He's a very, very religious man. And in fact, fact, I do remember the times that we went to synagogue together, that he never worked on Saturdays, and he was always praying day and night, always, always, before the meals, and prayed all the time. My father was a wonderful, wonderful man. He never left a lot of money, but he certainly left a great name, which I'm very happy to say.
Did you have a lot of cousins then?
We had a few cousins, not a lot, no. Mostly we stayed close on my mother's side, not on my father's side. My father had his sister. He had two sisters here in Omaha, believe it or not. He had one sister married her uncle, and their name was Epstein too. I don't know if you knew then or not, but one of them was Lil Epstein, Lil Gus, and she was the first cousin of my father's and also of mine, because her mother was my aunt and my great aunt by marriage, really. So, and then she had a sister named Edith, who married Stan Passer. And that my dad stayed very close to that side of the family. The other sister he had was named Weiss, and they were not that close together for some reason or other. I have no idea why or what, but they weren't close. Now my mother had two sisters here. One of them, as I said, she sent for her from Europe and brought her here, and her name was Libby. She was the youngest. My mother happened to be the older. Her mother died when she was 12 years old, and she was the oldest of the children in her family. I think she came from a family of 7 or 8. I'm not sure what her background was, and but she was the oldest. And her two sisters were. One of them was named Reva Foreman, and the other one was named Sternberg. What else would you like to know?
I bet you your grandchildren would love to know how you got back and forth from home to school.
Most of the time I walked. Sometimes I've taken a bike there, but most of the time I would walk, or that would be it. Yeah, really, that's most of the time. Very, very seldom would I take the streetcar to school, or back, for that matter. Never thought anything of it, really. Never had a car until I started selling liquor when I come back to the service. Most of us didn't have cars in those days, really.
What did you do in the service, Bay?
I was in the medics, and thank God I stayed in there. I wasn't in the medics, but when I was first went in, I was supposed to be with the Texas-Oklahoma Division as a company aide man. And they asked me at that time if they went through my service record, and they saw where my IQ test was fairly decent and high, and they asked me if I wanted to go to clerical school, and that was a lot better than living in the tents that I was living in. So yes, I did go to clerical school, and I became how I ever got in the medics, I'll never know, but I always thought if you were in the medics, you were either a doctor or a nurse, but I guess there were other people in the medics besides that. And I was assigned to a station hospital in Louisville after basic training. I was assigned to a hospital unit in Kentucky, and they went overseas about 6 weeks after I got there. And I was very lucky that because I was such a new recruit, that they didn't want me to go at that time. They wanted me to have more experience. And they sent me to Louisville, Kentucky to a general hospital to work in the post office of all places. And I worked there for a while, and then I became into medical supplies. And from medical supplies, I stayed in it until I went overseas with this hospital unit. And I was over for about 13 months in England. And when I got back, as I said, in 1945, that's when I got married to my wife, Etta. And we've been married now going on almost 57 years. It's quite a while. I hope it's a long time more, too. Really.
Tell me a little bit about your high school days, what you did in school.
Well, I took general courses. It's a funny thing. I can tell you one incident that I'll never forget because it did shape the part of my life. When I was a sophomore, I believe, I was 15 years old. I had a teacher at that time who had been the track coach. His name was Barnard. And he asked me what I was doing. He kept me after class one time. Asked me to stay. The bell rang, and he kept me after class. And he said, Epstein, he said, do you know about doctors and lawyers? And I said, and I was 15 years old. I said, the only thing I know about doctors and lawyers, sir, is that they make a lot of money. He says, well, salesmen make a lot of money, too. And he says, you're a born salesman. Don't you ever forget it, you know. And I guess I never did it. I think if anybody ever shaped a part of my life, I got to believe it was this man that did it for me. You know, really. He got me believing in myself, and that's the field that I chose, to be a salesman. So yeah, that's where I am today. Really.
Let me hear a little bit about your sister and brother.
Okay. My brother Jack, he was growing up, you know, as far as the age is concerned, Jack was 5 years older than me, and my sister is 8 years older. I really didn't know much about either one of them until I got back from the service, but more my brother than I did my sister, because 5 years I used to watch him play baseball and basketball and everything else, and I certainly always admired him because he was 5 years older than I was, and I used to watch him play, and I thought someday I would be doing the same thing myself. And anyhow, my brother Jack went in the service about a year before I did, and he was in New Guinea and Australia for almost 3 years. I happened to be, I'll jump around a little bit because I happened to be the best man at his wedding. When he got married, I think I was 18 years old at the time. And I'll never forget this story either. There's another story that my mother said to me when I got back from overseas and I was going to get married. And she said, don't you want to wait for your brother? I told her, I said, Ma, I don't know when he's coming back from Europe because the war was still, from Asia, because the war was still going on. I said, and I'm not waiting any longer because I'm going over, you know, again. So we got married before my brother came home. He came home about 6 months after I got married, really. And I got to say this, that I think for the years that have gone by between my brother, my sister, and myself, we've become closer and closer all the time. And I want to thank my mother for that. She always said to me, and I'll never forget this as long as I live, she said, after everything is said and done, the only thing you'll have in life is your brother and your sister. She said, and I've never forgotten it either. And I've also told that to my sons, and they are very close to each other because of what I preach, you know, really. There is no time that ever goes by that one of the boys, one of my sons lives in Houston, Texas, and he's been there ever since he went away to college, and that's a long time now. And anyhow, to make a long story short, I know there's not a week goes by that the boys don't call each other. And they're close. They're very close. My sister's name is Sarah Shriver, and she got married when I was 15 years old. She married a fellow named Julius Shriver, and he was originally from Minneapolis, Minnesota. And of course, I was 15, and my sister must have been around 23. So I can tell you that I was just a young boy, and I really didn't know a hell of a lot. The only thing I knew is that he came to live with us, and my sister was seemed very, very happy, and that's the only thing I can tell you, because I went to the service from there. And when I came back, they already had a little girl, and her name was Diana. Diana now, and we call her Dee. She lives in Minneapolis, Minnesota, where they used to live. And she's now a grandmother, and it's hard for me to believe that, because when I came home from the service, she was only 2.5 years old. She used to sit on the couch and read a book, and I thought how smart she was. Actually, she did it out of memory. She's still smart and still one of my favorite nieces, if not the favorite. My sister also has another girl named Marlene, who lives here in Omaha and who has 2 children. I don't know what else to tell you except that I always have, as the years have gone by, I feel closer and closer to my sister than I ever have before. And same thing goes with my brother. I can tell you that. And my sister is always, she's just a very wonderful lady. That's all I can tell you. I have nothing more to say. I wish I could tell you that she did things in my life, but I know that whatever I would tell her, whatever success stories that we had, she always felt good about them, really. So, what else can I say?
I want to hear a little bit about Jack and his family.
My brother Jack got married, as I said, when I was 18 years old, and he married a girl from Council Bluffs. Her name was Lucille, and he had 2 girls, and they're very fine girls. One of them lives right out of Boston, a town called Natick, Massachusetts, and she's a school teacher. She went to the University of Purdue and graduated. She's a chemistry teacher in Natick, Massachusetts, and his other girl happens to be right here in Omaha, and she's head of the West Side Community School, the cafeterias, all that. She does all the buying and distribution of food for the entire District 66. And she's a very lovely girl. She also has a daughter who just got married, is a captain in the Air Force, and she's now in Korea. And she's a beautiful girl like her mother. My brother Jack has always been very, very, what should I say, just a super young guy, and he never would harm a fly. I think people like him who have never met him, and he's just a great, great person as far as I'm concerned. I wish I could tell you more about Jack, and I know Jack was the real bright one in our family. He got a few years of college, and he left that to help out the family when he was in his 2nd or 3rd year of college, and to make $20 a week. So that tells you something. If anybody should have had a full college education, it should have been him. And he was very, very good in school. And a great guy and a great brother, and somebody for me to look up to.
I'd like to hear about your courting of Etta.
Okay. When I started dating Etta, I met her, as I said before earlier, that we met at a boy-girl party, and as I said, I fell in love with her. My wife was a very, very pretty girl, very pretty. As a matter of fact, I thought she was the prettiest of all the girls in the whole city at that time. And I felt very fortunate and very lucky to be her boyfriend. And when I became president of AZA, I told anybody that wanted to be standing in our crowd or in our gang that they don't date Etta. So I was the only one that ever dated her. And all the guys just backed off, really. So I guess we got pretty much used to each other, and we got engaged the first 3 months I was in the service, and got married as soon as I came back from overseas. I'll tell you a funny incident if you'd like to hear it, is that one time I was courting my wife, and we were sitting on the front porch where she lived, and she lived in South Omaha, and her mother was on the front porch with us, and the telephone rang, and my mother-in-law went in to answer it, and she came out back out on the porch, and my wife said to her, "Who is that, Mom?" And she says, "Oh, they had the wrong number. They wanted Harold Epstein." She knew me as Bay. So that is a true story, and still a funny one, and I still remember it pretty well. Yes, I would hitchhike all the way from 5400 South to 2100 North, or 2300 North, I should say, because I didn't have enough money to take the streetcar home, you know. And even though it wasn't fun, I didn't think too much about it at the time. But
When you went out, what was a typical date like?
typical day was that she would always wait for me after we got through playing ball on Sunday at the J, and we'd go out and have we'd go to a place called Dixon's. For 35 cents, you had a pretty good dinner, and then I would take her home on the streetcar, and most of the times I would hitchhike back to my house, you know, really. And there are a few times that I would catch what they call the crosstown streetcar, which went from right out of her house all the way to 24th in Grand Street, which would go all the way through, and I'd fall asleep, and the conductor, who knew me, always rang the bell and let me off at where I should have gotten off, you know, really. So, and then I went to the service from there, so, but we became very close. My wife became sweetheart of AZA in 1941, and nothing that I did, but she was a very, very popular girl, and with all of her friends and with a lot of the guys that knew her and knew about her. As I said before, she was probably the prettiest girl in those days of anyone that I ever saw.
Who were some of your friends in AZA when you were
And
president?
was Yale Richards and a fellow named Milton Gus, and Max Osterman, Morris Ricklin, the Slutsky Boys, Mike Lamlin, Melvin Levine. Those were some of the friends that I went with. Ben Miller. I'm trying to think who I played ball with, and, you know, Willie Sussman, and Ben Cutler. You know, we were all good friends in those days, and we just hung out together, and we played ball together, really. So we had a great time.
What did you play beside basketball?
I played baseball, and I didn't play much football because, number one, I worked after school, so I worked at a place called Inky Dinky, which was downtown, and I made all of $5 a week, all day every day after school, and all day Saturday, $5 a week. But I thought it was something else to have, really. Then I got promoted, and I went to Central Market and worked for 30 cents an hour on Saturdays, and I used to make about $3.50 or $3.60 coming out of there, and I thought it was really something. So I couldn't go out for sports at school because I was working, and I don't know if I'd have made it or not, but I couldn't go. It's just that I didn't have the time to do it either. Was I good in high school as far as academics was concerned? Fair, just fair, only because I didn't put my mind to it. I think if I'd have done a little better, I studied a little harder, I think I would have been all right, you know, really. But I didn't do it, and I had no idea of going to college, and I got out of high school. I was happy to get out and try to make $1 for myself and my family, really. So,
What was your first job after you got out of high school?
My first job was I went to work for the packing house, and I was making probably $60 a week in those days, and my dad was making around $30 or $35. But I lasted 3 months at it, and I said, this is not for me. I said, I'm going to do something else. And because, first of all, I couldn't shovel the meat. I mean, I could, but I didn't want to do that. And I never saw much of a future in it, and it wasn't me. Then I went to work for the Burlington Railroad, unloading mail sacks. And I'd work 2 hours, and I'd be off 2 hours. The only thing is, I could never go home. I was if a train came at 2 o'clock in the morning, I'd have to be there. And then I would be off till 5 o'clock in the morning. It would come again. So I worked that for a few months and left there. And I had a buddy of mine, a fellow named Lou Cass. I'm sorry I didn't mention him earlier. He told me that if you go to the shoe store, they're hiring, they're paying, you're guaranteed $12 a week, but commissions. But you wear a tie and a shirt and a jacket. And I made the application and I went to work there, but I never made less than $75 a week working as a shoe salesman. I worked night and day there. I never went out to lunch or anything else for that matter. And I love selling ladies' shoes. I really did. As a matter of fact, they wanted to promote me before I went for the service. No, when I came back from the service, I went to work for them, and they wanted to send me to Madison, Wisconsin, as an assistant manager up there when I was 22 years old, and I said, I almost took it, but then we were going to remodel our store, and they said it would only be a couple of weeks when they were going to remodel it, and they would give us our guarantee. At that time, it was up to $35 a week guarantee, and 2 weeks led to 3 weeks, and 3 weeks led to 4 weeks, and I went out and got another job, because everybody else, all the salesmen that were working in the store were starting to play cards, and that was not for me. I wanted to go out. I was married at the time, and I wanted to make more money, and I got a job as a sales trainee for a liquor company, making $50 a week, and in 4 weeks' time, they gave me a territory. The territory was when everybody threw in 10 accounts, which was the worst I've ever seen when I think back at it. But I was lucky enough to stay and make something out of it, and here I am today. Really, what else can I say to that?
I want to hear about your boys, one at a time.
Okay. As I said, well, I don't know if I said this or not. Paul was born in 1948, and I was real excited, first of all, that he was my son, and second of all, he was the first grandson in our family, and I don't know, I must have put him in a glass cage, because I'll never forget what my mother said to me one time. Every time she wanted to come over and say hello to him or hold him or something like that, I used to say, Mom, he's sleeping, or something like that, and I think this probably went on 3 or 4 or 5 different times, and then finally she said to me, she says, Harold, she never called me babe. She says, Harold, she says, you have your boy, and enjoy him, and love him, whatever you do, and she says, next time you want me to come over and see him, you call me, because I'm not coming anymore. Really. And it kind of woke up me that he was not a paper doll or anything like that. Should have been seen by his grandmother and stuff, really. But he was a fine young man, and I never had any problems with him, Paul grew up, and he went away to school when he went away to college. He went to Oklahoma University, and I was concerned about him, but he seemed to be very happy. He was always selling, and he himself went to work for Nebraska Clothing in his early high school days, and always made a dollar for himself too, you know, always brought it where he could live a little, you know, as well as some of his friends. But he was always a joy, always came home on time whenever he was curfewed or anything like that. Never, ever did we have any problems with him, really, never. And that's Paul, and to this day, when he graduated school, he went to work for Foley's department store in Houston, Texas, as a buyer of ladies' stockings. And one time, as a matter of fact, when I was in corporate, I was with McKesson. I saw Paul in New York, and we had dinner and went to a Broadway show one evening, and I enjoyed being with him. When I went into business, because I never thought I would own my own business, but when I did go into business, I called Paul up on the phone and asked him if he wanted to join me. And he said, Dad, he said, well, I asked him if he would meet me at a national convention in Miami, Florida. And when he and his wife, he called me back and said, yes. He said, Dad, you mind if I stay an extra 3 days? And it was vacation time. I said, no, that's perfectly all right. But when he came down there, we went around to the hospitality rooms, and I introduced him to some of the suppliers that we had and some that we didn't have. And he felt very much at home. And when he got back, this was about 2 or 3 weeks after I got back to Omaha, I got a phone call. I came back from off the street saying, Dad, do you still want me? And I said, of course I want you, Paul, but I said, this company will run with or without you, you know, and I want you to be happy. He said, well, my time is with you now, not after you've built the company. He said, I'm going to ask for a 6-month leave of absence. And he says, I may not work out the way you want me to, or I may not like it, and I'm just going to ask for that leave of absence. Well, that was 26 years ago, so I can tell you that it has worked out very well. And I have nothing more to say about Paul, except that he has 2 wonderful children, and he married his grade school sweetheart, and his one daughter's graduating college, as a matter of fact, next week, which is, I can't believe myself. The other one is a freshman in college right now, so made us very, very happy. I've gotten a lot of nachas from him, as they say, really. So, and he's done a great job. And, I got one other comment to make. I remember when he came to the company, he says, I don't want to be known as Harold Epstein's son. He says, I would like to be known as Paul Epstein. I can tell you that today I'm known as Paul Epstein's father, not anything else. So that's the story about Paul. My other son is Steve Epstein. Steve went to school at Texas University, and he was a darn good student and a very good jock, incidentally. But when he got to college, he didn't go into sports at all. He just studied hard and worked in chemistry lab down there. And he met a girl from Houston, Texas, who was a lovely, lovely girl. They have 2 daughters. One is in second year law school right now, and I'm very proud to say she's at Harvard University. And the other one is, and she's going to be a lawyer. And the other one is at second year in Emory in Atlanta, and she's going to be a doctor. So I have no qualms with Stephen. Stephen is very fine family. He also graduated dental school, and I'm very proud of him too. He's been very close to the family. So has a lovely wife named Elaine, and 2 wonderful children, Kimberly and Haley. That's all I can tell you about it. Gary is my youngest boy, and he also graduated University of Texas, And he went to work for Foley's department store like his brother Paul did. And they asked him a question, what makes you think you wouldn't join your father when you're home? He said, just give me the opportunity. He says, I'm not ready yet. Gary was a buyer in appliances, and he worked for Foley's approximately 3 years, and then he joined us. It'll be, I can't believe it myself, joined me 21 years ago, and in April. God, time is really going by. He met his wife in Texas. She was she was a school teacher. She came out of Florida. Her name is Lisa. And they have 3 wonderful sons. Naturally, I'm going to say that because I'm a very proud grandfather. Their oldest boy is now a freshman at the University of Wisconsin. The middle boy is going to be a junior at Burke High School, and the youngest one is in middle school. Now he's he's an 8th grader. No, he's a 7th grader. What am I talking about? Just turned 13 and bar mitzvah last fall. But the youngest 2 will be in the Maccabi games. They come this summer at the JCC. They've been very active at Jewish games. And the oldest boy was president of AZA, and he's also been active as a what should I say? He was very active in Jewish functions and camp and so on and so forth. They've all made me very proud, as you can tell. They're wonderful children. Gary is now half owner of our company. He and his brother Paul are partners, equal partners, and Gary is my baby. I don't know what else to tell you about him. He's just a wonderful young man, very compassionate, and I really don't know how to get into detail about it, you know.
Bay, when did you take over the company? When did you?
In 1975, I took it over. I bought it from a fellow named Roy Feldman. At that time, the company was called Capital Liquors, and being that he held on to it, he had 2 operations. He had the Budweiser beer franchise for Omaha, and he also had Capital Liquors, which had covered the state of Nebraska. And I wanted to take an option to buy the Budweiser beer franchise from him, but he said no, he wouldn't do that. He's going to keep that for his family, which I definitely understand today. But at that time, I didn't fight him too much for it, and because I was always in the liquor and wine business and never much about the beer business. And so I took over the liquor and wine business, and much to my dismay, Roy was actually losing money in the liquor and wine business when I first took it over. First of all, he had subsidized the liquor and wine company by Budweiser beer. It was 1-1. And immediately when I got into it, I saw that some of the pricing that he had absorbed from suppliers and did nothing about it. And also he had salespeople that weren't performing for him. And so it took me a year to finally clean it up. But I can tell you that I've been very fortunate that we have never had a losing month since I've been in the business. And hopefully we never will have. But things have gone our way. I've had some suppliers that I've befriended and have taken a liking to me, and they've come our way, and we've performed real well. We've survived a lot of... When I first bought our company in 1975, what we called, there was 8.5 wholesalers in the market. Today, there's only 3.5 left. And we happen to be one of the 3.5. We're not the largest, we're the second largest distributor in the state, and we do pretty good percentage at that time. I won't give you the exact fact, but we're okay. And we've had some ups and downs, but mostly ups and all that time. Oh, when I first bought the company, we had 26 employees. Today, I can tell you, when we first started, we had 26 employees in this company, and today we have a total of 91. So I'm very proud of the fact that we've grown tremendously, you know, in this period of 26.5 years. What else can I tell you about the company? Yes, we had secondary franchises. Today we have what we like to believe top franchises in our company, and we're in demand, and we run a good and tight ship, we think. That's about all I can tell you about our business. I just don't know what else to say. But
Do you have a lot of recollections of the old Jewish Omaha on 24th Street? Bakers and butcher
well,
shops?
when I was a little boy, I don't know whether it's worth mentioning or not, but when I was a little boy, as I mentioned before, my father was a pretty religious man. I know that on Saturday, Shabbos, he never worked, and I would go with him to the synagogue on that day, and that was actually about what it was. You know, we just didn't perform any other functions, and it was a day of Sabbath and a day of a holiday. And we walked back and forth to the synagogue. The synagogue was on 25th and Seward, and we lived on 25th and Grant at that time. And but never thought anything about it. That is my recollection. And North 24th Street at that time was right in the neighborhood. And all the Jewish butcher shops and the delis were there. A couple of the stores were owned by Jewish people, and we were in sort of a ghetto. We lived that way, and we enjoyed it. If I remember right, Ben Nachman lived on 19th Street, right? Really. Yeah.
Bay, I could detect by talking to you the pride and the love you have for your lovely wife and your family. Is there a message you'd like to leave with your children and your grandchildren?
Ben, that's a very good question. If there's a message, the only thing I can say is that you have to be honorable and believe in, I think, and charitable. And I think that all comes from the feeling you have in your heart. And if you're able, you do what you can for the people that you want to do it for. And if you don't enjoy that, I don't know what else you can have in life, really. That would be my only answer to, or what I would like to leave for my children and my grandchildren, for that matter. And hopefully someday my great-grandchildren. Really.
Bay, it's been an honor for me to be here with you today, and I've enjoyed it. I really have.
Thank you, Ben. I appreciate you coming here. I really do. I don't. This is my mother and dad. Her name was Sophia, and my father's name was Abram or Abraham. And he used to come to work every morning when he was 90 years old, and he would stamp invoices that were obsolete. But I think that helped Dad stay alive until he was 101 when we lost him. This is my mother and dad in the middle of the picture. As you know, my mother's name was Sophia, my father's name was Abe. And starting from the far left on the side is my niece, Marlene. And that is me, Bay Epstein, my wife, Etta, my niece Diana, my sister-in-law Lucille, my brother Jack, and his daughter Ronnie. And the second row is my sister Sarah, again my mother and dad, and her husband Julie. And on the far left, on the bottom, is my niece Diane again, and then my oldest son Paul, my middle son Steve, and my baby boy Gary. This picture shows you that there was really no special occasion except that it was for my 65th birthday, and my son and his family had come into town, and we all decided to take a family picture together. On the left, as you can see, my wife Etta and myself, Harold, Obey, and then I'll start on the very top. My grandson Robbie is being held by his mother Lisa, and my son Gary. And way over to the far right of the picture is my son Paul, my oldest boy. On the very bottom is my oldest granddaughter Kimberly and her sister Haley, her mother Elaine, and then there's my daughter-in-law Sandy and her son Corey and her daughter Carrie. That's who this picture is, and I'm very proud to say that. Oh, my son Steve, I'm sorry, he's in the background of his wife and his two children, right next to me. My father was in the Russian Army, and he was in Siberia for 3 years, and I can tell you that I don't know much about what had happened. I know that he was up there, and when he came home, he got married and came to this country. And this is my father, Abe, again, and the picture that he's got the little girl beside him, her name was Lil Gus. She was married to Charles Gus. Can we do it again? My father, again, is in the picture, and his cousin, his first cousin, was named Ricklin. Last name. This is a picture of Yale Richards and myself, which is Bay Epstein, and that was taken when we were in high school in front of Betty Rubin's house. Do you want me to do this? Okay. As you can see, my son Gary is the one in the middle, and his wife Lisa is on the right of him, and or to our left, I should say, and her son. God, why can't I think of his name? Ben is on. I should think of that. Very easy. Ben's on the far left, and the one next to Robbie, who is on the far right, is the youngest one named Alex, and that takes care of all. And I can't leave the dog out. The dog's name is Brutus. This is my son Steve and his lovely wife Elaine, and this was taken in Houston, Texas. Thank you. This is my son's daughters. The far one on the left is Kimberly, and the one on the right is Haley, and they both go to college. This is my son Paul, the oldest boy. He's on the far right, and his daughter is Carrie. She's graduating Indiana University. His son is Corey, and he's also a freshman at the University of Pennsylvania, and his wife Sandy.